All right, ladies and gentlemen, my dear student, my beloved student, how are you today? Today is a good day the Lord has made. We give Him thanks and praises. We give Him the honor and the adoration. Please lock the door. Make sure you lock the door, please, because we've already started. We've already started, right? So please don't drag the chairs on the floor, please, because I'm already on air now, please. Okay. So, guys, before we begin, we I consider it very important to give gratitude to God for His mercy, for His grace, for His faithfulness, for preserving our lives up to today. And remember, we don't deserve anything. We live by His grace. So we commit everything into His hand, whatever we are going to do today, for Him to take control, guide us, lead us, and give us the wisdom to be able to understand what we are going to be taught of, what we're going to learn today, and rebuke every evil spirit of distraction, deceitfulness. Help us to be able to focus. Okay, we thank you, God, for everything. Guys, back to what we are going to discuss today. We are still on the project management risk. It's very important. And there is no exam that you will not find questions from this topic. Risk management. I know it's not difficult, and you've done it in other subjects. Perhaps you must have done it in operations management. So we just need to cover it and make sure that you understand it. So last time we talked about force majeure. Force majeure, as we said, is a major force, a force that uh, when it happens in a project, no one will be held liable. For example, we talk about the situation where one could experience any event that is due to act of nature. For example, volcanic flood. Even we also talk about strike. You know, when you are running a project and eventually, due to the occurrence of strike, and you are unable to deliver on time, but the fact that the strike is not caused by you and you don't know how to control it, and it's something that we can regard as something beyond your control. So we can classify it as a force majeure, right? So today we are going to talk to these slides, if possible. If we are able to get done with this, then we move on to another slide. All right. So today we are going to talk about the different types of risk. Perhaps you can call it categories of risk, right? One of it is the political risk, right? Political risk can affect a project. Remember how we conceptualize risk. We say risk in project management is a kind of uncertain event, right? That could happen during the course of your execution of the project. And if those happens, it could have either a positive or a negative impact on the project. So, for example, if we are to consider political risk as it may affect project, depends on the type of project, we're going to talk about it. For example, if there is a change of government policy, right, regarding a project whereby you have subsidies or allocation of land to certain projects. So if government decides to change or to stop giving out subsidy or allocating subsidy, it's going to affect the project in a negative way. For example, I want to give you a practical example now based on this. Remember, you are students, right? You don't pay school fees. You got NSFAS, right? The government is subsidizing your education. Remember again that your study here is a project. I think I've told you that several times that you are embarking on a project, right? And your project is for 3 years. After the 3 years, what is going to happen? You are not expected to be here. You must graduate. You finish with the project, right? Because what you are learning here, your program here, got every characteristics of a project. Of course, it's a project. Right? Let's take it like that, and that is how it is. Yeah. If the government tomorrow, let's say DA, I'm not saying DA is going to do that, right? For example, AAC is be giving you that subsidy, subsidizing your education. If let's say next year now, okay, let me say you are see next year you won't be here, you are doing your final year. Let's say tonight the government said they're not going to give subsidy. What is going to happen? It's going to affect most of you, right? Okay. Let me see. Let's say the government now have changed. We now have a DA in the government. DA say we cannot afford free education for everyone. And the government decided to stop it. That project gonna be affected of your study. So that is what we are trying to talk about. It's a kind of a risk that could happen, right? You see, because you don't know what the government gonna decide. Nobody knows, right? So if it happens, how is it going to impact on your project? So if the subsidy is withdrawn, it will now come to a situation whereby you will be obliged to pay from your pocket, of which most of us doesn't have money as such to fund the project, the education. So those type of risks needs to be taken care of. For example, as a project manager, before you embark on any project, right? If you be commissioned to be a project manager of any project, irrespective of the context or whatever, irrespective of the nature of the project, you as a rational project manager, you must look at the project and see how you can be able to identify the risk that will make your project not to be successful or that could compromise your project, right? Then, having identified the risk, what do you do now? You assess, you do a kind of assessment of the risk. So, what is the type of assessment I'm talking about? You now try to see how likely will that risk happen, right? Okay. Now, you do that, and if it does happen, what is going to happen? What is going to be the impact? For example, let's say before you started your studies, you know that government is giving right? Government is giving NSFAS, it's subsidizing your studies. Then you now have to sit down and say, what if the government stop subsidizing my education? What is going to happen? You identify that one as a risk, right? Government withdrawing subsidy. That means stop paying for your education. Then you have to assess it now. You will identify it as a possible risk, potential risk. Then you do the assessment. How do you do the assessment? You say, how often does it happen? Does government all of a sudden just wake up from sleep, from slumber, and say, nah, we're not going to be paying for NSFAS again? right? When you look at it, in reality, it doesn't happen like that unless there is a change of government. Let's say another party is ruling, then they will say they will not going to be able to afford it, of which is not common. It means the likelihood of that risk happening is low. Are you getting what I'm saying? Right. Now, you look at again the impact. Right. If the government decide to withdraw the subsidy or decided to stop NSFAS, to be specific, what impact is going to have on my study? The impact will be, if you are somebody that is from a, let's say, a family background or from home that cannot afford, you know the impact going to be very grievous, right? Then, huh? No, I'm not. I'm talking reality. Yeah, it's a reality. You see, I'm giving you a practical example. Do you understand? Yeah, because I don't want to be giving you abstract example that you will not be able to absorb. These are things that are real, right? Of course, it's not going to happen in your time here, as far as you are in the college is concerned. Perhaps it could happen, or it can happen when you are at varsity, because nobody knows if the next election DA happens to come to power, because DA is capitalist. They will tell you, no, man, you need to pay from your pocket, right? But anyhow, there are always means. God will always provide. You mustn't be scared, right? God didn't give us that mind of that spirit of being scared. You must be bold and be courageous and commit everything to the hands of God. Don't be anxious of tomorrow. God is going to provide. Do you understand what I mean? Okay, for knowledge sake, these are the things we are talking about. Right. So when you've identified the risks now, you've done your assessment, then you need to develop or formulate strategies. Right. If NSFAS tomorrow ceases or stop paying for my fees, what am I going to do? What strategies can I put in place to make sure that I realize my dream? Because this is your dream for you to work towards or to be what you want to be. Say, okay, if NSFAS stop, perhaps I can look for a loan. Do you understand what I mean? Educational loan, of which, if you are qualified or if you are financially, uh, you got that, what do we call it? If your profile is okay and you got that, you are financially worthy or you got that worthiness, right? Trustworthiness, I mean. If you are trustworthy, then the bank can give you money, right? Then you finish with your study. Thereafter, you pay. You see, now you've got what we call strategy, plan B. This is how I'm going to do it. So those are the things we are talking about. These things are real, right? Okay, now professional risk. What type of professional risk are we talking about? Like we have, we say, will professional advice be available? It depends on the type of project you are executing. For example, if you have a project in a rural area, I also give you a typical example as well. If you have a project in a rural area, you know what is in a rural, let's say construction project, right? That construction project, you need to have maybe a modern facility that you want to construct there, which requires people with technical know-how. And you know, in the location, and when I mean location, I'm not talking about this location, let's say the rural area. For example, last time I went to Eastern Cape, I'm telling you, the place is very rural where I went to, right? If you have a construction project there that requires a kind of technical know-how other than bricklaying and carpentry, you're going to struggle to get people to do the job, right? That one can be classified as a professional risk, having the required skills, knowledge, the expertise to be able to execute the job. Right? You must envisage it. Okay, this project I'm going to do it in Eastern Cape. or I'm going to do it in a particular area, in a remote area. Let's call it remote areas. Right? How will you be able to get skilled people to work there? It's not easy. It's not everybody that like to work in remote areas. You need to mobilize people, right? Even what I'm talking about, it happens in the city as well. Sometimes you got job to do, but you don't have people to do the job. Personally, I've experienced that. Got some deal to do, but no person to help me to do the deal. You see, so that kind of risk is what we refer to as professional risk, right? Will professional advice be available? Will the project be able to attract the best professional? Those kind of stuff. Then economic risk. Economic risk. This one is very prevalent. You know what I mean by prevalent? It's very common, right? Economic risk, right? For example, you are running a project, and that project, there are certain items that you need in the project when you need to import from overseas. Some components that you need to incorporate in the project, right? Which is very common. There are certain projects here. Most of the things that, even if you have, for example, a common project like installing computers, right? Computer lab in a community or for a community project. Those computers are not made in South Africa. Those computers are not made, they are made from China, from anywhere in the overseas, right? Of which you need to import those stuff. Even if you are not importing directly, right? If there is a problem, if there is a fluctuation in the exchange rate, you are going to pay more. Do you understand what I mean? It doesn't necessarily mean that you should be the one importing from overseas, right? I remember during the time of COVID, computers and computer parts were very expensive. You remember when the ship, when as soon as people had that outbreak of COVID, that it came from China, people were scared. You see, it affected the global supply chain. And once there is a problem with the global supply chain, what is going to happen? The price is going to go up. You understand? So fluctuation in exchange rate, which we can describe here as the rate at which you exchange one country currency to the other. You know what I'm talking about. So if the exchange rate, let's say the value of rand depreciates, you have to pay more. You have to use spend more rand to buy dollars, which can affect your project. Then, yes, as we said, it will affect the cost global economy, right? Then the price of raw material if purchased internationally. That is what we are trying to talk about, right? But when you have a project of this nature, or you have a project that you envisage that this type of stuff is going to affect you, you must always make a plan. Do you understand what I mean? That is why sometimes people buy materials, they stock, right? Because they don't know what is going to happen, of which, again, buying product to stock, it got its own disadvantage, right? It's not something that is, it's not a silver bullet. There is no silver bullet that you can say, this is what I'm going to do, that is resolving the problem, right? For example, if you buy things to store, it can be stolen, right? It can be broken, right? So anything can happen to it. So you need to play around and see what you need to do to make sure that you are able to cushion the impact of such risk. Socio-economic, socio-cultural risk, demographic change affect demand for services, right? Stakeholders' expectation change. So, for example, you know the population is, for example, like you've got a project, right? And that project is to serve a specific community, right? And if most especially if the duration of that project is for a long time, remember, things are going up every day. For example, if the population, right, of that community change, it means more demand on that project or the output of that project. So if that thing is not taken care of, that okay, population is likely to increase. So let's put those things, factor those things into consideration so that we can be able to counteract whatever impact or consequence that will come up as a result of that. For example, let me give you a good example. You see ESCOM, right? This load shedding. What really brought out this load shedding? Or when you look at the problem of load shedding, one of the big problems is that the population, the demand, right? One, the infrastructure is aging, and the other one is that you got more people now using electricity than it was before. Quebec was built how many years ago? Long time ago. And when Quebec was built, it was not for too many population, right? The population of Western Cape or South Africa at that time was not much. But now you see, go to Danu, right? Those days, Danu used to be a very small place. I remember the first time I went to Danu, 5 o'clock, 3 o'clock on Saturday, you will not get transport to take you away from Danu. No transport. You know that taxi rank was full of grasses. You will never find any taxi standing there. Okay. Do you understand what I mean? So due to high demand, then it makes it the services cannot go around again. So it's putting a kind of pressure on the services. Stakeholders' expectation change. It can as well affect your project, right? Stakeholders' expectation change. What are we talking about? For example, a project is designed to serve specific purpose, right? And all of a sudden, the stakeholders, what you've already decided that, okay, this is how the project is going to be. These are going to be the outcome of the project. And you know, people can decide on anything anytime. They will tell you, okay, we don't want this. Now this is what we are going in for now. If you are not able to meet up with their demand, with their expectations, it's gonna make that project to be a failure. So you must always take that one as a risk, right? So for you to be able to avoid that type of risk, what type of contingency plan you need to make in place? Make sure that you involve them in the project. Make sure that they are involved from the beginning to the end, right? Involving them, first of all, it will boost their buy-in. And whatever decision that is going to make, they will be part of it. So if they are now turning out to be something that is they are making their expectations are becoming fickle-minded, changing. If they are part of the decision making, then they will know that this demand is going to make the project to fail. Maybe from there they can adjust in their expectations. Health and safety. You know what we mean by health and safety. Building, vehicle, equipment, fire, noise, vibration, all these ones can affect a project. For example, if you are building, you see the campus manager now have got an injury, right? You saw it because it was in the building site. You see all those kind of stuff. It's a risk because a brick can fall from anywhere to injure somebody. So all those things needs to be taken care of, right? Asbestos, you know the issue of asbestos here, right? Okay. Then technological risk, machines or technology getting obsolete. What do we mean by obsolete? Obsolete. For example, the cell phone you were using 3 years ago, is it the same cell phone now? No, it's not. It has changed. Technology is changing. It go quick, it become old so quickly. Obsolete means old, right? If you set up a machine, or let's say you've got a project, you've bought your machines and the resources, you've organized your resources together, then all of a sudden there is change of technology. So that means Whatever you got now will not be able to produce what is required. So it's a risk. You have to go and buy another one. What if you got no money to buy another one? Then it will make the project to collapse. You see, that is on the negative aspect of it. Then the positive aspect is this, right? You are running a project, right? All of a sudden, there is a new way of doing things, which is by virtue of introduction of new technology. That means if you are able to introduce that new technology, it's going to have a positive effect on your project because you're going to improve on your former way of doing things. So it's either positive or negative. It can be positive if you are able to leverage the advantage, the benefit of the new technology. So it's going to be negative if you are not able to keep up with the pace. So it's a risk that you, as a project manager, you need to identify such risk that there should there be a technological change. How is it going to affect the project, positive or negative, right? So why are we doing this, or why are we teaching you this? We are teaching you this as a project manager to be proactive. You know what it means to be proactive? To act before it happens. Prevention is better than cure. You see, when you know already what is going to happen, you can be able to make a plan. And you become rest assured that no matter what, it's not going to affect negatively your project because you've already made a plan, right? Then, like we have it here, we say quick obsolete of current technology. What will the cost be of procuring new best technology, right? If the cost is affordable, no problem, you will leverage it. But if you cannot afford it, it's gonna make you not to be able to take leverage of that and negatively to impact on your project. Will cost increase, right? Breakdown. Okay. Another thing we need to take note of in terms of technology, not only new technology being introduced, we can also talk about your equipment getting breakdown. If your equipment got broke down in your project, you are not going to be able to progress as it should be. Obviously, your progress will be retarded, right? It will impact on your project. For example, you got a project. Okay, let me give you an example. I think this one I'm going to give you now is under social risk. Remember, I told you there was a contractor that was bidding the biddings here, right? Then he left his concrete machine, concrete mixer. You know concrete mixer? Then the concrete mixer was stolen, right? All of a sudden, the project stopped. Me, I was keen in watching the project to know what is happening. Then I said, "What is happening now? Why this project stop?" They said that guy they stole his concrete mixer, and he didn't have money to buy it. You know about it? Were you here that time? Huh? But that is extra cost. You see, perhaps maybe he loaned money to buy that concrete mixer. You know how much to hire concrete mixer per day, per hour? They charge per hour. It's a lot of money. Yes. Yeah. Did you see? So that was a very big risk. As the machine was stolen, the project has to stop for months. I don't know how manager was able to get money to buy another one. You know those kind of stuff. You must always identify such risk because even himself, he didn't do his homework. How could he have left his complete missile? It's not funny. You see? So those kind of stuff we are talking about. Yeah, you know, you see. So if machine break down as well, it's gonna affect your project. So you must assess the nature of your machine, how old your technology is, whether it's able to sustain whatever workload that is being required. Otherwise, if those assessments are not done and in the course of executing the project, then the machine breakdown, it's gonna affect it. Then financial money, right? Financial risk included expended for not being available in the amount. For example, if the cash flow, you know what I mean by cash flow? The stream of payment that is coming from the project is not able to offset the cost. Obviously, there's going to be a financial problem, cash squeeze. The project can be subjected to that kind of unfortunate situation, unfortunate financial situation. Then contractor associated with failure of contractor to deliver. You've got project, right? Perhaps this project you sublet or you outsource part of it to other companies or to individuals. And if they fail to deliver on time, it's going to impact on your project. You must look at these things and see, identify such risk, and do the assessment for you to be able to establish how often does such happen, and if it does, and what will be the impact on your project. Then environmental risk, compliance with the changing standard, disposal of rubbish. So environmental risk is another thing that can affect your project. In terms of compliance, there are certain projects that requires a high level of compliance, right? For example, if you got a project that concerns food or health or medicine or medical stuff, you see, you need to comply with a high level of, there are a lot of regulations that you need to comply with. And if you don't comply with such, or if there is a negligence of some sort on your part along the way, what is going to happen? The government going to clamp on you, and that project is going to close. You see, those are the things that you need to talk about here, right? Physical theft. This one is a good example of what I give to the example I said just now about the machine, the concrete mixer. So it was theft, right? It was stolen. Theft, vandalism, arson, right? Building related risk. All these things can be classified as risk that you as a project manager, it depends on the type of project you are doing. It doesn't mean that all these things need to appear in one project, right? Arson. Arson is related to the stealing, right? There are certain people, their hands are, they got, I call it itching palm, you know. But people, there are certain workers, when they are going home, they take the property of, they steal from work, which is not allowed, which is not something healthy for a project. So if you happen to have staff that steals, I remember let me give you an example, you're going to laugh. I used to, okay, let me give you this last one before you go. I used to have a friend, this guy was a contractor, right? Then people used to give him building, contract him to build for them. Then the type of contract he used to take, they were buying materials for him. He himself was stealing the materials. Did you see? You got that kind of people. You see, when he's going home, he will put bag of cement. As he's bidding for somebody, then himself gonna be stealing materials there to bid for his own, which is something that is not right. You see, so we got those type of stuff. So we can classify those ones as theft, vandalism, whatever. So guys, we are going to stop here so far. I'm going to upload the video for you.